Welcome to Easy Style with Sammy. I'm your host, Sammy Bedell-Mulhern. Each episode, I invite a friend, family member, colleague, or just someone I've met on this journey called life to come and share their personal style and approach to business, parenting, life, and everything in between. You'll hear motivational and inspirational stories that will help you refine and build your own personal style. Remember, style is easy when it comes from within. Hey friends, welcome to Easy Style with Sammy. Today, my guest is Margot Bisnow. Margot, thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So we've never met in person, so I love that there is just a combination of people on this podcast that I know well and those that I'm getting to meet for the first time and kind of learn alongside of all of you that are listening. So Margot, before we kind of jump in, would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are?
Wow. Who am I? So since we're talking about school, my dad was a professor. I grew up in university towns. Everyone I knew practically had a PhD. It didn't occur to me that there was another way in life. I went to Northwestern. I worked for a couple years, and then I got an MBA at Northwestern. And then I came to Washington for a year. As my husband says, my year is almost up. I met him. I got married. I had 2 kids. I raised the kids. I had a lot of interesting jobs. I worked in government. I did things like foreign assistance, which I guess is now frowned upon. I didn't really understand that there were different kinds of brains other than mine until my kids were maybe in high school, and I'm happy to share those stories with you. It didn't occur to me that I could have a child who didn't graduate from college until my older son told me after 2.5 years he was dropping out. I've done a lot of sort of interesting professional things, but then my older son, the one who dropped out, started an organization called Summit, which is an organization of young entrepreneurs. And I would go to these events and meet all these young people who had started all these amazing businesses and organizations. And I asked them, like, I'm just so curious how you ended up the way you are, like, so willing to work so hard, take on so much risk, to work so single-mindedly to achieve your goal. And they all told me the same thing. They all said I had someone who believed in me, who told me I could do anything I put my mind to. And usually it was a parent, and even more usually it was their mom. Not always, but usually. And I was so struck by this, I kept talking about it, and the kids said, you have to write a book. And I said, I can't write a book. And they said, no, you have to write a book. Anyhow, they wore me down, and I wrote a book. And they wrote in the foreword, everyone needs someone to believe in them, and sometimes that's even your kids. So, and then I updated the book. And so this one that we're talking about now is the 2nd edition. And it's now my favorite topic of conversation, what I discovered and what I learned and what I think is so important. So I'm thrilled to have this conversation because it's my favorite thing in the world to talk about.
I love that. And I similarly had an experience too, like when I went to college, and even when I started my first jobs, was when I first realized, like, oh, people don't all think the same, or like logic or common sense isn't the same for everybody. Because like my jobs in college were in customer service, working retail, and I would be like, this is not hard work. Like, you know, some of these things in the way that we interact with people or the way that we do our jobs, like, should just be obvious. And what we think is obvious is not always obvious. And so I think it's interesting that you really leaned into this entrepreneur thing, because would you say, like, age aside, that the entrepreneur, I don't want to say gene or like style or like approach to things, it is a unique thing. Like, not everybody has that in them. So have you noticed like a difference in like younger entrepreneurs versus like other adults that have maybe been through a couple different things? Like, are the personality traits still the same?
So I would say, first of all, you can't make your child an entrepreneur.
Right.
You cannot take a child who has no curiosity and send them to entrepreneur camp and think they will become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
There's definitely something in that kid. And also, not everyone wants to work that hard. Not everyone wants to take on that kind of risk, which I certainly understand. But in my book, I interview 70 entrepreneurs, and 5 of them have a sibling who's an entrepreneur, only 5 of the 70. And in all 5 cases, they also have a sibling who's not an entrepreneur. So the point is, and it's what my book is about, you can create these conditions so that you're raising entrepreneurial children. And there are things you can do to make your children more entrepreneurial. And whether or not they become entrepreneurs is kind of beside the point. Because you can be more entrepreneurial and you can be a librarian and do it with creativity and ingenuity and have sessions at the library for reading to the parents. I mean, you can be entrepreneurial in anything you do. You can't make your kid an entrepreneur, but you can certainly create creative, risk-taking, resilient children.
Yeah. And I think maybe because, you know, I have a 13 and a 16-year-old as we're recording this, and like we're very much in that stage of parenthood where we're like, are we setting them up to like be able to be the independent people they need to be when they go out in the world? And so, you know, I think maybe what you're talking about and maybe what you could list off would be like some of the skill sets that we would typically find in an entrepreneur. Because I love that you're talking about creativity, thinking outside the box, but also dedication to an idea. And I would say even you use the term risk, but permission to fail. Like, I think it's very hard for parents to like let go of that grip and to allow our kids to fail at young ages. We want to protect them. So like, what are some of the common characteristics that you kind of see in a quote unquote traditional entrepreneur? Because also, as I ramble on, you know, all parents might be very risk averse themselves. It might be like, heck no, I don't want to raise an entrepreneur. I want to raise somebody who's going to go to school, be like in a traditional job and like have that traditional income. So maybe kind of explain what some of those characteristics are.
Right. But I just want to jump on your very last statement before I talk about
this.
And that is, we can have an idea of how we want our kids to turn out, but that shouldn't be forced on the child.
Right.
And maybe you want your kid to be a doctor or a lawyer or some sort of professional, and maybe you think that would be the best outcome for your child. When I talk to parents who say this, and they say, you know, that that's not really the direction that their kids seem to be headed. And I say, so I just want to get this straight. Your goal for your child is they should spend 40 years doing something that doesn't give them joy.
Yeah.
And so many of the parents in the book, when they discovered what it was that their kids loved, playing video games, directing movies, cooking, sewing, whatever. At first they were horrified, but eventually when they saw how much joy their kids got from it, they were like, if this is what makes you happy, we're for it 100%. And I was talking to one dad after I'd given a talk, and he came up to me and he said, I'm so upset I haven't talked to my child in 3 weeks. He started this little company in his dorm room. I think it's really stupid. He just announced he's dropping out of college and he wants to move home and work on this little company, and I think he's ruining his life. And I called over this guy I know, Craig Clemens, who I know didn't graduate from college and has made $1 gazillion. And I said, Craig, let me ask you a question. You have a choice of hiring 2 kids. One started a company, dropped out of college, worked on it for a couple of years, decided it's not the right company, and decides he really needs experience in a bigger company and to kind of to see what he wants to do. The other kid stayed in college, wasn't motivated, wasn't a great student, wasn't passionate about anything, but graduated. Which kid are you going to hire? And without blinking, he said, I'm going to hire the first kid, and so are the other 100 entrepreneurs in this room. So I would say to parents, like, you just have to get over it. The way we grew up and the path that worked for us isn't the path anymore. And you have to understand that your kids may be on a different path, and you have to watch them, and you have to see what gives them joy, and you have to nourish that and support that. So that's sort of the answer to the second part of your question. The answer to the first part of your question is there are so many things that are super important if you want to raise entrepreneurial children. One of them, which you mentioned, is the attitude toward failure, which is incredibly important. I talk about that a lot in the book. I love the Billie Jean King quote, we don't call it failure, we call it feedback. Yeah. And parents, every parent, I interviewed the most diverse group. I mean, half men, half women, every race, religion, socioeconomic background, education level, number of kids in the families, born here, born overseas. I mean, small towns, big cities, you name it. And to my amazement, they basically all raised their kids the same. And one of them was they never punished their kids for failing. Mm-hmm. They would say, what do you think you should have done differently? What did you learn from this? What could you change next week? They never, scolded them for not getting something right, for not getting a good grade or not hitting the home run or whatever. They just, it's like, let's learn from this. Let's figure out what to do differently next time. So I think that's hugely important. And of course, with that comes, with the ability to fail, comes resilience, which you also mentioned. Learning that failure is how you learn and grow, and not to be afraid to fail, and not to be afraid to take risks. Because if you're afraid to take risks, you're not going to do anything creative or interesting in your life. Right. And you're afraid to take risks if you're afraid to fail because you're afraid someone's going to get mad at you. And it's super important for companies as well as for parents, Another thing that I would say is super important and which really stunned me when I was interviewing all these entrepreneurs and their families is every single one of them had a passion outside of school when they were growing up.
Oh, okay.
And in every case, their parents supported that passion. Sometimes it took a big gulp, but in every case. For a lot of them, that passion was sports. Mm-hmm. A lot more of them were serious athletes than were selling things in high school. Very few of them actually were, high school entrepreneurs. Yeah.
But they're learning how to hone a craft and how to test and work within okay, well, this worked, that didn't, I needed, and it has inherent failures and wins, and that kind of makes sense to me.
100%. And they learned grit, and they learned teamwork, and they learned resilience, and they learned how to pivot when things weren't going well, and they learned the trade-off between hard work and results, and they learned to keep going, and and for a lot of them it was sports, but others it was like running for student government or playing chess or entering rap contests or trying out for parts in the school play. I mean, they were all doing something they were working hard at that they were competing in. And I just think that's just hugely important.
Yeah. I have a theater kid myself, so I know that whole world of things, which I think sometimes is more nerve-wracking on us as parents than it is for the kids. But I do want to kind of bounce back to the first part of your answer, because I have a kid who's very into video games. Doesn't really know where he wants that to go, but knows that he wants that to be something that he does in his career. And I think it's been really interesting because as we have parents have leaned in, I mean, he's only 13, so we've got time. But we've been having some fun lately, leaning into the research of okay, well, here are all of the different things you now could do with that. Okay, so which path might make sense for you to go down? Do you want to go down the coding route, or are we wanting to do competitive gaming, or are we wanting to... there's a whole esports management, just like you would do professional, a basketball team manager, they have esports team. So there's all of these things. And I think it's really interesting as a parent when you just lean in and have conversations with your kids about what they enjoy and love to do, that you kind of surprise yourself in, there's a lot of different options that are out there that you just didn't know about. I mean, like, those things didn't exist when I went to college. And same with my daughter who's in theater and that's what she wants to go to school for. It's like, okay, well, let's also take a look at all of these other things. Like, yes, you can be a stage actor, but what other interests do you have so that we can give you the options to be successful in the area that you want? Because both of those are very unique, competitive, a little bit nerve-wracking. But we've had fun with those family conversations.
100%. I mean, my younger son is a musician.
Yeah.
And so
terrifying.
And so it was the same thing. And we always knew he would do something in music.
Yeah.
He wrote 300 songs before he graduated from high school. The music just like pours out of him. And we always told him, like, it's hard to make it as a pop star, but we always knew there would be, if that didn't work, he could write songs for video games. He could write songs for commercials. He could write songs for TV or write scores for movies. I mean, or manage other people's music or whatever. There's like a million things you can do, as you said, in the music business. And I know two people who made big careers in video games. One was a competitive gamer, and he had a team. This is something I know basically nothing about, so I may sound a little inarticulate. And the other one, who's in my book, his parents were immigrants. I mean, his family was immigrants. They came from Vietnam. They, almost died on their little boat, getting here. And his parents wanted him to be like a doctor or something. But they always encouraged him playing video games as long as he also got A's. Yeah. And he was one semester away from graduating from college with a degree in, physics or something. And he had a chance to meet someone from electronic arts and talk to them about an idea he had. And they said, come over and talk to us. And anyhow, he joined their first intern class. He dropped out of college with a semester to go. He ended up as the lead producer of League of Legends. The first time he went back to Vietnam, it was to a stadium with like 100,000 people watching his game being played. And then he became executive producer of Arcane, which is a Netflix TV show about League of Legends. And now he's kind of morphed on to something else. But he said for the first few years, his mom would always call and say, you're sure you're happy? You don't you're sure you don't want to go back to college? And he's like, I'm happy, Mom. And she's like, okay, as long as you're happy, Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting transitional time that we're in. I remember when I called my parents to tell them I was taking a year off from college, they about lost their minds. I ended up graduating, but that was a whole big ordeal. And so as we kind of navigate these changes, I think with COVID, it's interesting. I don't know how you feel about this, but like just in the Gen Z age group, like I know they went through a lot and they missed a lot of their milestones during COVID. They didn't get a lot of that social stuff, but I do feel like a whole lot of innovation and entrepreneurship kind of was birthed out of that. And I don't know if it was just that they felt the space to be able to kind of do that where they wouldn't have had that opportunity before because maybe they couldn't go to college right away or whatnot. But has it been kind of fun and interesting to watch that evolve and see all of these young people now, like just doing things like you mentioned earlier, whether you like to knit or craft or make soap or play video games, like the opportunity for you to turn your passion into a job seems to be more accessible, not easier, but more accessible to more people. So has it been kind of fun to watch those stories kind of come out and kind of see that evolution?
No, I think it's fantastic. And so many young people now today, I mean, when my son started Summit in 2008, it was really unusual. Mm-hmm. And today, like more than half of young people say they want to be their own boss.
Yeah.
They want to start something. They want to build something, create something. And, it doesn't have to be a company. It can be a service or, they can be an actor. I mean, actors are entrepreneurs because they have to, organize everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's fabulous. I love that, watching these kids be creative. And I think it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, but it's so important for parents to realize that the path that worked when they were growing up is a different path today. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that made me so crazy. About the college admissions scandal? Do you remember that from a few years ago? Mm-hmm. Aside from the fact that basically what these parents were saying to their kids were, if you don't go to this school, you can't be a success in life. Mm-hmm. And if this school knew the real you, they wouldn't want you.
Yeah.
And so we have to pretend you're something other than what you are so that you can go to this school, so otherwise you won't succeed, which, of course, is the worst possible message for a child. But the other part of that is, one of them, their daughter was like a big Instagram star, like selling something on, like their parents should have been so proud of what they were doing and saying, like, I want to support you. This thing you're doing is fabulous, and maybe you'll go to college and maybe you won't. And, and if you decide to go, we'll find a school that loves you because you're amazing. Right? And parents just have to realize it's a different world. And these kids who are, just being programmed every minute of their life to study things that aren't interesting to them and, to have extracurricular activities that take up all their time that they don't enjoy and are being forced to go to college at these outrageous prices now. And like, for what? Like, companies don't really want to hire these people. They want to hire somebody who's interesting, who's done something, who's creative, who's built something, who's got ideas, who's flourishing, who's thriving. Not somebody who's just grinding away doing stuff they hate.
I love that. And I think to your point too, that starts younger. Like that starts even like nurturing that starts younger, even more so than I think even college admissions are changing. Like they also want people that are more interesting, that aren't just like, I got these good test scores, blah, 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 blah. And so I think nurturing that in your child younger, allowing them to explore, fail at things when they're younger, say, okay, I tried this, didn't like it. Like, okay, so I'll just draw on my own experiences, but my daughter was put into a competitive dance team when she was 5 years old. She was really young, but the studio was like, she's really good, we're going to put her in here. So we did. She did it for 2 years, and she was like dancing with girls that were 2 or 3, 4 years older than her. And at 5, that's a big age difference. And it got too much for her, and she got overwhelmed. And after halfway through her second season, she was like, I'm out. I'm done. Like, I'm over this. And that was heartbreaking for us because, number one, she was really good. But number two, we spent a lot of money. But we just we told her, like, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll scale back your dances, but you have to finish the season because you're part of a team. You need to connect. And she ended up moving on to theater, which is what she loves and the joy of her life. But we could have very easily just continued to push her into that. But we very much let her guide that. So if she fails at it, or fail, I use the word fail, she wasn't a failure, but it just didn't end up being the thing that like lights her up. But if we didn't let them try a bunch of things at a younger age, how would they ever get to that point to where they're like, okay, this is my joy and my passion? So as we kind of wrap this up, I would love your thoughts on like, how can we kind of take cues from our kids at a younger age to continue to nurture certain skills or natural tendencies that they have, and still kind of guide them in a way to where they can have some of these entrepreneurial skills? Or like, are there things that we can pay attention to in our kids when they're little to be like, okay, yeah, they've got this spirit, they've got this energy, we want to make sure we continue to foster it?
Yeah, I could talk about this for like another hour.
I love it.
So I said that every one of these entrepreneurs had a passion growing up. For a lot of them, that passion changed over time. Just as it did with your daughter. It was one passion here, and then, after 5 years, it was a different passion, and then after another 5 years, it was another passion. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And the point is, like, the parents, supported that. And I think, I talk to parents of high school kids and they say, well, I just don't know what their passions are. And I think then you're just not paying attention.
Yeah.
Because every child, there's things that give them joy and there's things they can't stand. And my grandson now is in kindergarten, and when I was at his class, and all the kids had written down what they wanted to be when they grew up and drawn a picture. And it was, I want to be a dancer, I want to be a policeman, I want to have a store, I want to fly a plane. I mean, whatever. There's things at 5 that they all enjoy. I can see with this child that, he'll see something, he'll see people dancing and he'll be like, oh, that's boring, I don't want to do that. And then he sees somebody climbing a tree, he's like, oh my gosh, how can I do that? Like, pay attention.
Yeah.
Because they all have things that give them joy, and then let them do it. Don't say like, oh, stop wasting so much time, writing music or singing or dancing or sewing or cooking or playing tennis or playing golf or swimming or whatever it is, and go study your trigonometry. Like, who cares about trigonometry? Like, seriously, I mean.
Unless your passion is like architecture,
right,
or
right, or whatever you need
yeah,
trigonometry for. But I mean, the point is just to see what gives your child joy.
Yeah.
And as you say, to support it. And I have a whole section in my book called Don't Worry About Straight A's, where I talk about all these examples of kids who from a young age, their parents moved their school several times. They were unhappy in a small school and they were moved to a big school. They were unhappy in a big school and they were homeschooled. They were unhappy homeschooled and they were moved to a different kind of school. And I mean, on and on and on. It's you have to pay attention to what's working for your child. And I was with you, like, you have to finish the semester, you have to finish the thing. But then if you hate it, you can move on and go do something else. And I mean, I have one example. I'll just tell you, this guy, Benny Blanco, who now he's well known because he's engaged to Selena Gomez. But I've known him for, since he was in high school, and he's written, I think, 25 number one songs. He's gotten 11 Grammy nominations. I mean, he's just a superstar. And his mom told me that when he was in kindergarten, she got a call from his teacher every week saying, Benny won't sit in the reading circle. And his mom used to say, so? Right. And, I mean, she just was like, that's just not important. Like, who cares growing up whether you can sit in a circle, Yeah. And she supported him the whole time, and told him that, even if his teachers found him annoying, that she thought he was great. And she found a music teacher for him at some point, and the teacher said, oh my gosh, he's like the most talented kid I've ever met. And that meant more to Benny than the fact that his teachers all thought he was annoying, And so you just have to be there for your kids. You have to support your kids. You have to believe in your kids. You have to tell your kids how proud you are that they're doing so well in whatever it is they love. And, it'll work out.
Yep. That's quite the name drop. That's probably the biggest name drop we've had on this podcast.
Oh, really?
There.
That's so funny. Oh, I've got lots more.
Well, my son in kindergarten said when he grew up, he wanted to be a baby. So I don't know what that means about him psychologically, but we always cracked up about that one. That one stuck into my brain. So I just had to share that. But you do have a lot of names that you can drop, and I know that you have a lot of them in your book. So as we wrap this up, Margot, why don't you tell people a little bit about your book? What's it called? How can they find it? How can they connect with you even more?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, here it is, Raising an Entrepreneur, How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dreams. And it's the second edition, so make sure you get this one, because every story starts with a picture of them when they were young and a picture of them today. So here's John Chu, who directed Wicked. And there he is as a cute little kid, and there he is today with his mom. And, I mean, he's another one, his parents just had this idea that he was, they were immigrants and they wanted their kids to pursue the American dream, and it wasn't film. And he was doing, since he was in fourth grade, it's all he wanted to do. And his mom came into his room when he was, I think, a freshman in high school, and he was supposed to be asleep, and he was doing a little video on his laptop, and his mom said, "Go to sleep and stop wasting your time on this nonsense. You have to be prepared for school in the morning." And he burst into tears and said, "You can't make me stop. It's what I love. It's what I want to do for my life." And his mom said, "Go to sleep. We'll talk about it tomorrow." And she picked him up at school the next day, and she'd gone to the library, and she had 10 filmmaking books. And she said, "If you want to do it, be the best."
Oh, that's amazing.
So,
yeah. I mean, I have a Chinese mom, so I can understand, but who's very supportive. But yes, culturally, I'm sure that was very difficult for her to just make that leap. But makes sense that she would say that, and that's beautiful.
Anyhow, so it's raisinganentrepreneur.com, and Instagram is at Margot Bisnow, and I'm trying to do stuff now on LinkedIn also, and so...
I love it. Well, we will link all of thewthose up in the show notes at easystylewithsammy.com/42. Margot, thank you so much for sharing your stories. Can't wait to check out the book.
Thanks. It was super fun.
Just want to say thank you again to Margot for joining me on this episode. Such a fun conversation and thinking about how we can encourage our kids at all ages, encourage them to have those entrepreneurial just skills that can kind of help them be successful. I love that she mentioned, creativity at any level in your career, regardless of if you're running your own business or not, and just being that problem solver and being resilient and working through everything. So I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, and make sure you go check out her book. We will have it linked up in the show notes at easystylewithsammy.com/42. Thank you so much for listening. I would love for you to drop your favorite takeaway from this episode on YouTube where you're watching this video, or leave us a comment wherever you listen. As always, leave us a review so more people can find this podcast and kind of be on their path to living their best life. Style is easy when it comes from within. I'm struggling with my words today, but I so appreciate you being here and listening. And as always, if you have somebody that would be a great guest for this podcast, please make sure you reach out to me. Sammy at easystylewithsammy.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one.